Have you ever caught someone red-handed on your own property, and they still try to lie about it? Well, I've got the footage, and this time, she brought backup. This isn't just an HOA story. It's a war story. So hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and stick around, because what you're about to see will leave you speechless. Her hand was halfway through my fence gate when the camera caught her, again. Her floral print sun hat did nothing to disguise the fact that it was her. Karen Martin, president of our HOA. Elbow deep in my feed bin, trying to scoop up armfuls of expensive chicken grain like it was her God-given right. The infrared night vision caught everything, the grain spilling from her hands, her muttering something about fair redistribution, and her flailing back over the fence when my dog barked from the porch. But this time, she wasn't alone. Just before she made her escape, another figure popped into the corner of the frame, a man. Tall. Wearing dark clothes. And holding what looked like bolt cutters. I didn't know what she was planning. I didn't know who the man was. And I sure didn't know why they were suddenly coming back, after I'd warned them once before. But something told me this wasn't just about chicken grain anymore. Let me back up for a second, because you need to understand how we even got here. I moved to Briar Creek thinking it was going to be a peaceful life. Quiet mornings, rows of lavender blooming by the fence, chickens clucking, and sunlight touching the edge of my small 2-acre farm. My name's Jack Reynolds. I'm 42, divorced, and finally doing something that doesn't require me to wear a tie. I bought this land with the settlement I got after working 18 years in finance. I wanted a life that made sense. No alarms. No board meetings. Just earth, sweat, and growth. At first, everyone seemed nice. The neighbors waved. Kids biked past my drive and hollered, "Hey, Mr. Jack," every now and then. But then the HOA knocked. It started small. They didn't like the solar panels I installed. They said they disrupted the community's aesthetic. Then it was the chicken coop, too unsightly, they claimed, though it sat behind a row of hedges taller than most of their houses. But the worst of them all was Karen Martin. Karen was the kind of woman who believed she had been chosen to restore order in the neighborhood. Blonde bob that never moved, cardigan even in July, and a voice that could slice through steel. She walked around with a clipboard like it was a weapon. And the way she looked at me, you'd think I built a meth lab, not a tomato patch. But I didn't budge. I followed the zoning laws to the letter. I double-checked property lines. My lawyer even confirmed I was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. My little farm? Technically grandfathered in. Karen hated that. Then the anonymous complaints started. Trash bins, out too long. Weed growth, invading HOA property. Noise violations from roosters that crowed once, at 6 a.m. I knew it was her. No one else cared. The neighbors liked my eggs. Some even bought jams and organic veggies from my front stall. I gave discounts to single moms and even donated to the local school. Then one morning, I woke up and found my feed barrel open. Half the grain was gone. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal. But then I found boot prints, small ones, with a tiny floral pattern. Not even coyotes wear Skechers. I installed a trail cam the next day. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Until it did. She came in at night. Took a sack of fertilizer. Came back 3 nights later, this time, stealing my harvest baskets. I confronted her once, right there in the middle of my driveway. She denied everything with a smile. Said maybe I left my gate open. Maybe someone else did it. I couldn't prove it. Not yet. So I decided to wait. I upgraded my camera. Bought a motion-activated spotlight. Didn't tell a soul. I even put a dummy barrel by the coop, filled it with low-grade grain. Just to see if she'd take the bait. Then last night happened. Karen, on tape. Trying to steal from me again, with backup. This time, she wasn't just snooping. She came with a plan. I sat in my truck that morning, staring at the footage over and over. Zooming in on the man beside her. Who was he? Her son? A hired hand? He kept his head down, but he was clearly breaking something in the background. I heard a faint snapping sound, a fence, maybe? The sun rose slowly over the field that morning, but my mind was racing. I walked to the corner where the camera had pointed. The chain on my back gate? Snapped clean off. Someone had definitely tried to break in again, only this time, they meant business. I should have gone to the police right then. But something told me to wait. I needed more than a blurry video of someone in a sun hat. I needed a full story. Proof they couldn't talk their way out of. So I pretended nothing happened. Acted casual. I even waved to Karen as she passed by my driveway later that afternoon in her silver Lexus. Her smile was wide. Too wide. She knew something. But here's where things took a turn. Around dusk, I noticed my dog, Scout, barking toward the woods behind my property. That wasn't unusual, but this time, he wouldn't stop. I walked out with a flashlight, heart thumping. Then I saw it. Fresh tire tracks, right behind the barn. Leading straight into the brush. And beside them? A glove. Pink. Floral print. Still damp from the night before. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Karen wanting me gone. She was planning something much worse. And she wasn't alone anymore. The tire tracks behind the barn didn't just vanish into the woods, they curved along the edge of my back fence, crossed over a shallow ditch, and came to a stop at a flattened patch of grass. No debris. No wrappers. No dropped tools. Just that eerie stillness that creeps in when something isn't right. My breath fogged in the night air, and even Scout stopped barking, his ears pinned back as he sniffed around the trail. I stared at the glove in my hand. That same floral print Karen always wore when pruning the bushes in her front yard. The glove was wet, not from rain, because it hadn't rained in 3 days, but with what, I couldn't tell. Dew, maybe. Or sweat. I bagged it in a plastic Ziploc and took it inside, setting it on the kitchen table while I reviewed the camera footage again. There was one thing I hadn't noticed before. Just before the spotlight kicked in, Karen had turned her head toward the camera. Not directly, she hadn't seen it, but enough that her face came into view for a second. She was smiling. Not in a mischievous way. In a weird, satisfied kind of way, like she was about to win something. The man with her didn't smile. He moved quickly, always keeping his back to the lens. That bothered me. I didn't sleep much that night. Every rustle of a tree branch made me glance out the window. I left the porch light on. I set up 2 more cameras. One near the barn. One at the back gate where they'd come in. I didn't tell anyone, not even my neighbor Clara, who'd lived next to me for years and always brought me peach pie in the summer. The next morning, things got stranger. A notice was taped to my front gate. Folded in plastic. HOA letterhead. From Karen herself. It read, Mr. Reynolds. We've received numerous complaints regarding the presence of unsafe materials and unauthorized agricultural practices on your property. A formal inspection will take place this Friday. Kindly make necessary adjustments, or further action will be taken. Unsafe materials? Agricultural practices? That was rich coming from a woman who thought kale was a skin condition. I called my lawyer again. He confirmed, again, that the HOA had no legal jurisdiction over my lot. They can't inspect anything unless they get a county mandate, he said. And so far, you're in the clear. But if they start pushing through city channels, that's another story. I started thinking this wasn't just about nuisance or even jealousy anymore. Karen wanted this land. But why? Later that day, I found out something that flipped everything. Clara stopped by with a brown bag full of tomatoes. She looked nervous, like she had something to say but wasn't sure how. Jack, she began, Do you know about the Briar Creek expansion proposal? I frowned. No. What's that? They're planning to rezone the north side, including your land. They want to put in a new recreational center. Karen's been leading the talks. They need to show that the area's underutilized or a hazard. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just stealing grain or trying to be petty. She was building a case. A fake one. Hoping that if my property looked neglected or dangerous, the HOA could petition the town to seize it under redevelopment rules. My farm, my dream, was standing in the way of their fake paradise. I thanked Clara. She didn't stay long. She said some of the neighbors were starting to get letters too. Some of us are scared, she admitted, her voice low. She's got people on her side. And she knows how to twist the law just enough to get away with it. I knew I had to act. But I couldn't blow the lid off just yet. I needed everything lined up. That evening, I moved some of my camera footage onto a secure drive and hid it inside the barn. I kept my phone on me at all times. I walked the property line twice before sundown. Every creak made my heart beat faster. I sat on the porch that night, dog at my feet, shotgun by the door. Not to use, just to feel like I still had some control. Around midnight, Scout growled low in his throat. Not a bark. Just a warning. I stood up slowly, flashlight in hand, and stepped off the porch. Nothing. I clicked the light on and scanned the tree line. My heart thumped hard. Then I heard it. A snapping twig. 2 short coughs. Whispering. I swung the flashlight toward the barn, and froze. There they were. Karen. And the man in dark clothes. Standing at the barn door. She was holding bolt cutters. He had a crowbar. And they had just started to pry open the lock. For a second, neither of them moved. The beam from my flashlight had caught them full in the face. Karen's eyes widened, and she dropped the bolt cutters with a sharp clatter. The man beside her didn't flinch. He turned, fast, and darted into the trees like a shadow. Karen stumbled after him, but not before tripping on a rock and nearly falling. She caught herself on the barn door and hissed something under her breath. I was too stunned to run. All I could do was watch as she disappeared into the dark, her white sneakers vanishing behind the brush, swallowed up by the forest. I raced to the barn. The lock was halfway off, scratched, dented, but still hanging. They hadn't gotten in yet. My camera on the roofline blinked red. It had caught the whole thing. Scout barked again, now fully alert, pacing back and forth near the gate. I stood there, breathing hard, heart hammering. This was no longer about suspicion or warnings. This was criminal trespass. Plain and simple. I stayed up the rest of the night, lights on, shotgun beside me. At sunrise, I pulled the camera footage, made 3 separate backups, and stored them in different places, one on my cloud, one on a USB in my truck's glove box, and one on a hard drive inside a hollow part of the porch bench. I wasn't taking chances anymore. But the question that kept nagging at me was this: why risk coming back? They already tried once. They got caught. Why push it further? I got an answer later that morning. A black SUV pulled up in front of my gate. Out stepped a man in a tan jacket, holding a clipboard. "Morning," he called out. "I'm from the Briar Creek County Development Office. Just here for a preliminary assessment." My jaw tightened. Assessment for what? He walked up slowly, careful not to cross the property line. "The Community Council flagged your parcel for possible review under Section 8B of the Municipal Redevelopment Act. Something about underutilized land and safety concerns. This is just routine." "No, it's not," I said firmly. "Who filed the complaint?" "Anonymous," he replied. "But it was submitted through HOA channels." There it was. Karen had already started the next phase of her plan. She was trying to push the local government to declare my land a safety hazard, maybe say the barn was unstable or my tools weren't stored properly. That would open the door for an inspection and maybe even condemnation. I'm going to have to decline entry, I said. This is private land, and I've got legal proof the HOA holds no authority here. Unless you've got a signed court order, you're not stepping foot past that gate. The man hesitated, then gave a polite nod. Understood. I'll note that on the form. Have a good day, Mr. Reynolds. As he drove off, I knew I had a small window, maybe days, before something bigger dropped. Karen wasn't working alone anymore. She had connections. She was laying legal traps now. I went into town that afternoon to get copies of my land records notarized. On the way out of the courthouse, I spotted Karen's Lexus parked at a cafe near Main Street. She was sitting outside under a blue umbrella, smiling, sipping tea, and laughing with two men in suits. One of them had a county zoning badge on his belt. I didn't go over. I didn't need to. She was greasing wheels. That night, I got a knock at the door. It was Clara. Her eyes were red from crying, and she had a folded envelope in her hand. Jack, she said shakily. I think you need to see this. Inside the envelope was a flyer, an HOA newsletter draft marked confidential. Somehow Clara had gotten her hands on it before it went to print. Right there in bold text was a section titled Community Safety Update, Suspicious Agricultural Operations on Reynolds Lot. Below was a list of false claims, dangerous chemicals, unsanitary animal housing, and possible fire hazards. All made up. They're planning to mail this out next week, Clara whispered. They want to turn the neighborhood against you. Make you look unstable. They think if the community is afraid, no one will defend you when they try to seize the land. I sat down slowly. It felt like the ground had dropped beneath me. I had done everything right. I followed every rule. I kept to myself. I helped neighbors. And still, it wasn't enough. Because to Karen, people like me didn't belong here. But I wasn't giving up. I've got footage, I told Clara. Of her trespassing. Twice. With someone else. If I can catch them again, doing something worse, maybe it'll be enough to stop all of this. Clara nodded, but I could see the worry in her face. Jack, be careful. She's not just obsessed. She's desperate. That night, I moved all my valuables into the back of the truck and parked it at a friend's house on the edge of town. I didn't want anything stolen. I charged my cameras. Set my phone to auto backup every hour. And I waited. 2 nights passed. Nothing. But on the third night, around 2 a.m., Scout growled again. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the monitor. 2 figures. One carrying a gas can. The other with something long in hand, maybe a stick. They were walking along the back fence. And they were heading straight toward my barn. I grabbed my flashlight and dashed to the porch. Scout was already barking at full volume, spinning in tight circles near the steps. My hands trembled as I snatched the phone and opened the camera feed again. The 2 figures had moved closer. The one with the gas can lagged behind, scanning the property, while the taller one, the man, kept his head low and moved fast. They were 15 feet from the barn when I flipped on the floodlight. Boom! A blast of white light cut through the night like a siren. They froze. The man dropped the stick, which I now saw was a crowbar. Karen held the gas can like she hadn't planned on getting caught with it. For a second, I saw it all click across her face. The panic. The fury. The disbelief that I'd outplayed her again. She turned to run. But I was already halfway across the yard. Hey! I shouted, my voice echoing off the trees. Put it down and stay where you are. The man bolted, crashing through the underbrush with that same quick speed from before. Karen hesitated, just long enough for Scout to come flying around the barn, growling like he meant business. She squealed and stumbled back, dropping the gas can as she scrambled after her partner. I didn't chase them this time. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed. Camera footage. Clear as day. Gasoline. A crowbar. And a video timestamped, showing two people attempting what I was now sure was arson, or at least vandalism. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I called the sheriff's office before the sun even rose. Told them everything. When they arrived later that morning, I handed over the hard drive and the gas can. The deputy whistled low. "This is serious, Mr. Reynolds," he said, turning the can in his hand. "If this is what it looks like, it's a felony." I nodded. "And I think there's more. She's trying to frame me. Take my land." He promised they'd investigate. That was all he could say. By noon, word had already spread. Karen hadn't shown up for her morning HOA rounds. No clipped footsteps. No cheerful gossip in her driveway. Her Lexus stayed parked, locked, and still. I could feel the neighborhood shifting, quietly. Windows peaked. Curtains twitched. People knew something had happened. Around 4 p.m., I got a knock at the door. It was Mr. Dalton, the oldest guy on the block. Retired Marine. Kept to himself mostly. This was the first time he'd ever visited my porch. "I heard," he said simply. "Just wanted to say, you handled it right." He didn't stay long, but his visit gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The next day, the police came back. They asked to search the area behind the barn again. They found boot prints. Fresh tire marks. And, hidden beneath a bush, a cloth sack containing wire cutters, gloves, and a list. A printed list with bullet points. One line stood out. "Break barn lock, pour gas, make it look like electrical short." They had a whole plan. When the deputy read it out loud, I felt sick. Karen hadn't just snapped. She'd planned this for days. Maybe weeks. She wanted the barn to catch fire. She wanted people to believe I was careless. That my farm was dangerous. And if that narrative stuck, the rezoning committee would have all the ammunition they needed to seize my land. The officer bagged the sack and assured me it would go to forensics. But here's where it got worse. That same evening, just as I was pouring grain for the chickens, Clara came running over. "Jack," she gasped. "You need to come to the community board meeting. Right now. Karen's there. She's spinning the whole thing." I didn't want to go. I was tired. Angry. But I couldn't let her rewrite the story again. When I got to the rec hall, the room was packed. Neighbors lined the walls. Karen stood at the front with a stack of papers in hand and that same frozen smile she always wore when she was lying through her teeth. And while I deeply regret what Mr. Reynolds claims, I must remind the board that personal security footage is not admissible without verification. We must consider the broader impact of having unregulated agriculture in our community. She saw me walk in. Her eyes didn't even flinch. "Mr. Reynolds," one of the board members said, nodding toward me. "Do you have a statement?" I stepped up. Pulled a flash drive from my pocket. "I have something better," I said. "Video. Night vision. Audio. And a deputy's report confirming 2 attempted break-ins and evidence of premeditated property damage. I've already turned it over to the sheriff." A murmur spread across the room. Karen paled. One of the board members raised a hand. "Until the sheriff completes his investigation, this matter is outside HOA jurisdiction. I recommend we suspend all rezoning discussions involving Mr. Reynolds' land." It wasn't a win. Not yet. But it was something. Karen tried to speak again, but her voice wavered. Her grip on her papers trembled. The board chair cut her off gently. "We'll wait for the legal findings before taking further action." Meeting adjourned. People began to file out. Some nodded at me. A few offered quiet pats on the back. I found Clara near the door. She looked relieved. But just as we stepped outside, Clara stiffened and grabbed my arm. Across the street, parked under a flickering streetlight, was the same black SUV from before. The man inside? The same one from the camera footage. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just sat there. Watching. And then he picked up his phone and made a call. We stood frozen on the sidewalk, Clara gripping my arm like she'd seen a ghost. The SUV's engine purred quietly, headlights off. The man inside, her accomplice, the same one I'd seen on my camera twice now, held a phone to his ear, eyes fixed on us through the windshield. He didn't look rushed. Or nervous. He looked calm. Calculated. Like everything was still going according to some plan we hadn't fully uncovered yet. Then he pulled away from the curb. No tire screech. No sudden burst of speed. He just drifted off into the night like a shadow. I watched until his taillights disappeared at the bend in the road. "That's him," I said quietly. Clara nodded. "I know." Back home, I checked the newest camera feeds. Nothing had happened in the hour I was away. No movement near the barn. No new tracks. But the sense of unease didn't fade. If anything, it grew. Who was he? Karen had gone from fake letters and community drama to property damage and near arson. But this man, he had never shown his face clearly. Never spoke. Never flinched. Was he just a hired hand? A neighbor with a grudge? Or someone with more to lose than Karen? I didn't know yet. But I could feel it, this was far from over. The next day brought a quiet like I hadn't felt in weeks. Birds chirped. The chickens clucked. The sun rose without anyone trespassing or pounding on my gate. But even that peace felt fake, stretched thin over something waiting to snap. Around noon, I got a call from the sheriff's office. "We've opened an investigation," the deputy said. "Karen's being interviewed this afternoon. We've got the footage, the gas can, and the list. We're taking it seriously. But we're not charging her yet." "Why not?" I asked, barely keeping the frustration out of my voice. "We want to tie it to the man in the video. Without knowing who he is, it's all circumstantial. Karen can still claim she was checking on a neighbor or misunderstood her boundaries. She's good at playing innocent. But if we can ID him and link them? That's conspiracy." I thanked him and hung up, but my hands were clenched. Karen was still out there, walking free. Still smiling at neighbors. Still pretending to be the hero of Briar Creek. And she had backup. So I started digging. I asked around discreetly. Clara helped too. We knocked on a few doors under the guise of a neighborhood watch check-in. A few folks said they'd seen that SUV before, but only in the evenings. Always parked near the HOA office. One man, David, mentioned seeing Karen getting into it a few nights ago. "Didn't think much of it," he said. "Figured it was her nephew or something." That was our lead. That night, Clara and I parked across from the HOA office. No lights inside. Just a trimmed hedge, an American flag on a pole, and a motion sensor porch lamp. We waited. 2 hours passed. Nothing. Then, just before 10 p.m., the black SUV rolled into the lot. The man got out, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He looked both ways, then walked straight into the office building. Used a key. No hesitation. I snapped photos of his face, as much as the light allowed. Clara took video. We waited until he left, 20 minutes later, carrying a file box under his arm. We followed. Kept our headlights off. Stayed 2 cars behind. He drove out of Briar Creek, into the older part of the county. A dead zone with empty buildings and silent streets. Then he turned onto a dirt road and disappeared into a property behind a locked gate. We didn't go further. But I got the license plate. The next morning, I handed it all to the sheriff. They ran the plate. And that's when it unraveled. The man's name was Roy Temple. He wasn't a resident. He wasn't family. He was a contractor, hired by the HOA 6 months ago to consult on community development. But here's the kicker, he also had 2 prior arrests in another county. One for trespassing. The other for destruction of private property. Both charges had been dropped. But the pattern was there. Looks like Karen's been paying him under the table, the deputy said. If we can confirm that, we've got her. And then came the tipping point. That afternoon, someone leaked the HOA's internal expense report. Clara didn't say how she got it, and I didn't ask. But there it was, 3 payments to Temple Services, listed under Community Cleanup Consulting. $3,000. Paid in cash. No receipts. No logs. The sheriff's office moved fast. Karen was taken in for questioning. News spread like wildfire. Neighbors stared as cruisers pulled up outside her house. She didn't wave this time. She didn't smile. She was led out, quiet, tight-lipped, the sun glinting off her silver cuffs as they locked behind her back. People were shocked. Some cheered. A few whispered. But for me? I thought it was over. I really did. Until I got home that night. Until I checked my trail camera, now set to alert me instantly. There was a new clip. Dated just 20 minutes before I walked through the door. It showed the back of my barn. Scout is barking. Wind blowing through the trees. And a figure. Not Karen. Not Roy. Someone else. Leaning against the side of my barn wall. Spray painting something in big black letters. I hit play. And my breath caught in my throat. Across the side of my barn, in dripping paint, were the words. You think this is over? And below that. You're next. I backed away from the screen slowly, cold sweat forming at the back of my neck. My legs felt heavy, like they were anchored to the floor. I stared at the footage again. Rewound. Paused. Zoomed in. It wasn't Karen. It wasn't Roy. The figure was smaller, wiry, and moving with a kind of jittery energy. A hoodie pulled low, face shadowed, but the hands, young. Shaking. Spray can rattling in one, flashlight in the other. Who the hell was this? I ran out the door with Scout, my heart pounding like a war drum. The barn was just ahead, barely touched by moonlight. The message was still wet. Huge, crooked letters dripping black like venom across the wooden wall. I felt a rage boil up inside me, because this wasn't just vandalism. This was a threat. And it meant Karen hadn't been working alone. There was more. I called the sheriff again. They promised to send a patrol immediately. I paced my porch, shotgun propped beside me, my back tight with tension. Scout stood guard like a statue, tail straight, his eyes fixed on the trees. 10 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the driveway. A deputy stepped out, checked the barn wall, and called it in. More units arrived. They secured the area, took photos, and swept for evidence. A fingerprint team followed. I stood there while they worked, trying to calm my thoughts. But they didn't slow. They kept spiraling. Who was it? Why now? Why after Karen was already in custody? Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Around 3 a.m., one of the deputies approached with a strange look on his face. Mr. Reynolds, he said, holding up a plastic evidence bag. You might want to see this. Inside the bag was a school ID. Dropped near the edge of the tree line. The name? Tucker Temple. Roy Temple's son. 16 years old. Known locally for a couple of minor run-ins. Nothing serious, until now. And guess who'd been spotted with Karen at multiple community service events? Tucker. Always hanging close to her, helping carry boxes, painting fences. No one had thought anything of it. A kid helping a respected adult. Except now, he'd taken up her cause. And escalated it. We pieced it together over the next few hours. Karen had brought Tucker in as her helper weeks ago. After Roy started drawing attention, she shifted some tasks to Tucker: trespassing, spying, even minor sabotage. The plan was simple: if things got too hot, blame the kid. Play it off as a troubled youth acting out. Roy gets deniability. Karen walks away looking innocent again. But now Karen was in custody. Roy had vanished. And Tucker? He went off script. I barely had time to process it when a call came in over the deputy's radio. Shots fired. 2 blocks over. Report of a break-in. And someone matching Tucker's description, on foot, armed with a bat. It didn't make sense. Until the deputy turned to me, eyes wide. That's Clara Street. I didn't wait. I jumped into my truck and tore through the back roads, headlights cutting through the fog, heart clawing up into my throat. When I turned the corner onto Maple Lane, I saw 2 cruisers already there, lights flashing, neighbors on porches, phones out. I slammed on the brakes. Clara was safe. She was sitting on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, shaking. One window had been smashed in. Scout jumped from the truck and rushed up to her, tail wagging. But Tucker? He wasn't there. He ran, Clara said, her voice trembling. Broke the window, screamed something about how this wasn't supposed to happen, then bolted when he saw the lights. They chased him for half an hour. Through yards, over fences, down the drainage canal behind the elementary school. Finally, they caught him near the old train depot, soaked in mud, crying, a baseball bat still in his hand. I watched them haul him into the cruiser. He didn't look angry. Or smug. He looked lost. At the station later, after everything calmed down, the sheriff called me into a private room. Showed me a statement Tucker had given. Scrawled handwriting, barely legible through tears. He said Karen told him you were evil. That you hated the community. That you were planning to destroy everything her dad built. He said he was just trying to protect her. That he thought if he scared you enough, you'd give up and leave. I sat there, staring at the page, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. All this. Because of lies. Because someone in power couldn't stand the idea of not being in control. Karen was charged with criminal conspiracy, trespassing, and attempted arson. Roy was arrested a week later in a motel 2 counties over. He folded fast, gave up receipts, timelines, the whole scheme. The HOA board immediately removed Karen from her post. An independent audit followed. They uncovered years of shady deals. Bribes. Unapproved contracts. All hidden in plain sight. Tucker was sent to a youth rehab program instead of juvenile detention. I didn't press charges. I saw him once before he left. He couldn't even look me in the eye. And my farm? It stayed mine. The barn wall took a few coats to clean, but I left one panel untouched. Just a corner, with the smeared edges of the threat still visible. As a reminder. That peace isn't something given. It's something fought for. Especially when people like Karen wear smiles sharper than knives. So now, when neighbors ask why I don't go to HOA meetings or trim my hedges quite the way they like, I just smile. Because they don't know what it took to keep this place standing. But I do. And I won't forget. This all started with a fence and a few chickens. It ended with arrests, headlines, and a message burned into the side of my barn. If you made it this far, drop a fire in the comments to let me know you watched to the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because around here, peace doesn't come easy, and the next story might just be yours.